poetry anthology. Moved on from there to publishing poetry collections, and then our first young adult novel, which was by Kestrel, the book's called Hidden Lives. And so Kestrel has been one of our authors for a while. Approached me about a year ago with this idea for an anthology about Section 28 and its legacy, and stories from the survivors, if you like, of Section 28, people who grew up while Section 28 was in force. So I'll let Kestrel tell you a bit more about that. But meanwhile, why did we decide to create a queer indie publisher? Well, for one thing, it's to tell the other side, or the multiple other sides, not just the other side, but many other sides of the story. Because in the mainstream press, you only hear a couple of stories about LGBTQ people and trans people in particular. It's the same tired old stories every time. And so we wanted to share a wider range of stories. We wanted to communicate the diversity and the beauty and the richness and the joy and the euphoria of the LGBTQI plus community, as well as the challenges and the stress and the dysphoria and the despair and so on. So that was one reason, to share a range of different stories. And then the other reason was more sort of deeper and more personal reason, really. And it was to be the people that we needed when we were younger. And so because growing up, particularly in the Section 28 era, I was a child of the 80s and 90s, and just not seeing people like us anywhere on TV, in movies, and least of all in books. It's as if we didn't exist. And because of that, created a lot of stress, a lot of depression, a lot of isolation, and just not knowing who we were, not having a language even to talk about who we were. And so it gives me huge joy as an adult to be able to share the kinds of stories that I needed when I was growing up, and the kinds of books that I would love to see on the shelves. And so with that, I'd like to hand over to Kestrel. Kestrel Guyan is an academic as well as a writer, and she's a lecturer at the London Interdisciplinary School, where she's also head of digital, as well as being author of 2 books, Cat Mum and a Ravelsome person. Over to you, Kestrel.
Thank you. I'm not quite sure how we'll follow that, to be honest. It's kind of a gushing introduction, and I'm just stood here kind of slightly embarrassed. Thank you all so much for coming out this evening in what is very slightly drizzly weather. It was a really interesting drive into Scotland earlier, and the weather has improved since. So thank you for being so welcoming. I haven't been to Edinburgh since before the pandemic, so it's really lovely to be back. As much as the pandemic still rages, and appreciate all of you that are wearing masks. I would hate to get COVID right now. Any time, really, but middle of the book tour would be unfortunate timing. Just a quick note on kind of how the is going to run before I do a little bit of scene setting. I'm going to talk to you for a couple of minutes. We've got some of our contributors to the book this evening who will come up and read some of their contributions. We'll have a bit of Q&A, so please think of good questions that just like the universe, anything. Ask me questions about anything you like, it's fine. And also ask questions to our amazing contributors, Anna, from the publisher. And after that, you're free to chat to us a bit more informally, get some squiggles in the book if you like. And if you don't have a copy of the book, you can pick one up from this amazing bookshop. And it is so lovely to be in the queer bookshop, just kind of sitting here looking at all these amazing books on the shelf. I love books, so thank you for coming. Working on this project has been super interesting. Because the more you start looking at history, the more you realize that we're kind of on a bit of a seesaw. Like, queer phobia is not a new phenomenon, but then neither is love and acceptance, queer people being welcomed into communities. When you look back to ancient Greece and ancient Rome, where trans identities were actually celebrated, the most attractive thing you could be was trans in ancient Greece at times. Fast forward to the 15th century, and basically anyone even remotely different was a witch. It was puritanical. And if you were queer, you were almost certainly othered during that time. The 20th century was absolutely no exception to this seesaw of queer rights. The first ever recorded gay marriage happened in 1903, quite early. But then by 1908, a spate of laws had been put in place to make it harder for us to be who we wanted to be and love who we wanted to love. Times kept changing. By the late 1960s, in corner cafes under red neon signs in places like the Stonewall Inn, the fight for queer rights was really heating up. We were making headlines. We were making headway. We were starting to get heard. The 60s and 70s were decades of Harvey Milk and Armistead Maupin and quite a lot of upward mobility. Then the 80s happened. In 1981, something new came along, kind of eclipsed a lot of the progress that was being made. First known as gay pneumonia, then KS, GRID, and eventually AIDS. This epidemic presented tabloid editors, Tories, and queer detractors a chance to paint LGBTQIA+ people as a danger, as dangerous to the public, dangerous to children, as dangerous to be around. In May 1987, Margaret Thatcher, indeed, thank you. Let's get a louder boo for Margaret Thatcher. Indeed. She won a third term in office for the Conservative Party. And, oh, hang on, the thing's not loaded. She won a third term in office for the Conservative Party. She gave an hour-long speech about what the Tories were going to do over the next 5 years. The first half an hour was mostly talking about how much we'd be better off if we stopped being members of the European Union. Times don't change. But the second half an hour, she switched tack to talking about education. And this is what she had to say about education in 1987.
Education to be part of the answer to Britain's problems, not part of the cause. But it's the plight of individual boys and girls which worries me most. Too often, our children don't get the education they need, the education they deserve. Children who need to be taught to respect traditional moral values are being taught that they have an inalienable right to be gay. All of those children are being cheated of a sound start in life. Yes, cheated.
That applause came with a standing ovation. And within 12 months of that speech, Section 28 of the Local Government Act was written into law. It read, I'm going to try and do my best Tory impression as I read this. A local authority shall not intentionally promote homosexuality or publish material with the intention of promoting homosexuality or promote the teaching in any maintained school of the acceptability of homosexuality as a pretended family relationship. With those 35 words, generations of young people were utterly damned and totally isolated. So deeply hurt by this law was the LGBTQIA+ community, and so utterly alone it had left us. We didn't even realize how many other people like us were struggling too. I didn't know how many people were just like me. Nobody knew how many other people were gay, lesbian, bi, pan, trans, agender, asexual, aromantic, queer, a term that I and many others have proudly reclaimed. This year, 2023, marks 20 years since the final repeal of Section 28. But the shadow of that law still looms over so many of us, even schools and policies today. That is exactly what they hoped it would do when they brought that law in. But what they didn't count on is that in our exile, we'd find each other. We would find community. It's through that community that I found answers, I found understanding, I found strength. I was able to answer questions that plagued me my whole life. Why all the internalized transphobia and homophobia that I felt? Why did I hate myself so much? The answer is simple. I was taught to. I was taught to hate myself by a law and a society that prioritized conformity over individuality, compliance over comfort, simply hate over love. This book, 2 years in the making, is an antidote to a virus of hate that once filled our homes, our schools, and our lives. It's filled with stories from people like you and people like me who have been impacted by a law so awful that its dark legacy is still felt 2 decades after its repeal. Editing, curating, and contributing to this book has been such a privilege. I'm immensely proud of the stories that told here, and it's been one of the greatest pleasures in my life to work with such an incredible range of contributors, some of which you'll hear from tonight. As you hear from many of them this evening, whether you're here in the shop or watching online, I hope that you get to feel the same sense of appreciation, solidarity, and gratitude and love that I had felt on reading, editing, and curating their works. But if nothing else, after tonight, if there is one thing that you take away, it's that we have to stay together as a community, and we have to make sure that history never repeats itself. Thank you. So, on that note, I think it's time we heard from some of our incredible contributors. There are 4 of us here this evening that have contributed to the book. We'd all like to read some or all of what we put in the book and some other bits and pieces as well. So first off, I would like to welcome up John.
Thank you. I need to open a speech. So I was actually looking at just what you were saying there, and I actually went to school in 1986. So I was 5 when 1986. Section 28 came in a year after, and I went to school in 1999. So my whole teaching, primary, secondary education was through Section 28. And I became a teacher, and largely that was because of Section 28. This is my story. I haven't put my name to it, actually in the actual story, but it is mine. It's been a very challenging year, with a lot of anti-trans comments, a lot of comments that as teachers who are paving the way and pushing forward for LGBT education, that we are boomers, and it's been very, very damaging. So it's not the happiest of endings for my story. I'm now out of the classroom, but I will be going back in because I'm not going to live there with. So, but here's my story anyway. 2000, an undergraduate teacher starts university wanting to change the world, eager to learn and to make a difference. He has started his journey, and his classroom will be one of acceptance. The repeal has happened, but no training has been given on how to deal with LGBTQIA issues. What can we discuss? What can we say? Are we allowed to talk about it now? The ban on lesbians and gay men serving in the United Kingdom Armed Forces has been lifted. Jack and Ethan are dating with Dawson's Creek. Willow and Tara kiss on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And by the end of the year, the age of consent across the UK is about to be equalised to 16 from 18. Young people are watching gay people on TV and are talking about it to their friends in their playground. But PSE classes still don't talk about same-sex relationships, and gay teachers well, we're still in the closet. LGBTQI groups are non-existent in schools across the whole country, and posters from Stonewall, LGBT Youth Scotland, and TIE are nowhere to be seen. There's an urge to move forward, but the steps are delicate, and it still whispers and trepidation. 2005. He's now an openly gay teacher in his first school, but he's having a few classroom management issues with a difficult SD class. He is newly qualified, trying to be authentic and wanting to succeed. He's asked for help, but instead of giving educational advice, his head teacher simply, sorry, to turn the page. Simply reflects on him about being openly gay, assuming that this is the issue, and leaves him feeling dejected and questioning why he feels like he's back in the high school under Section 28. Is this what his career will be like from now on? And I think that's probably a lot of my career. The triggers of Section 28 are always there. 2010. He's been working in this school for 3 years and loving it. It's forward thinking, and the staff and students are a community. The Equality Act has come into play, and things are slowly beginning to move, finally. Equality Act posters are seen in schools, which show the overview of how the Act will be, which reads that LGBTQIA people are now a protected characteristic. Stonewall posters of "Some People Are Gay, Get Over It" are beginning to line the school corridors, and a small rural school in the east coast of Scotland enters a film contest with Panasonic with a short documentary called "It Gets Better," sending a message to all students from the group of S3 students that their school is one of acceptance and equality, and surprisingly to the group, wins the UK Prize for Global Citizenship. The award-winning group of young people create an LGBTQIA school group open to all and speak at a Stonewall conference about their work. And I am cheesing. 2015, new school and new council. He now works at one of the biggest schools in the West Coast with my colleague, Mandy, who you'll hear from later on. He's asked by the head teacher to use his knowledge of the LGBTQI education to create a training for staff, mandatory for all teaching staff. It's forward thinking. He delivers equality training and how to feel confident in delivering LGBTQI inclusive education, as well as tackling homophobic and difficult language or opinions. We are starting to see teachers want to do more. Stonewall are offering training for staff to move forward with embracing LGBTQI education in their schools, and LGBTQ Youth Scotland have launched their new schools charter programme, and posters for inclusion are now in classrooms and school corridors across the whole country. 8 schools are still facing some backlash, but the Equality Act is helping things to move along a little. He wears a gay t-shirt to this LGBTQI assembly, and a fellow member of staff comes out to all students. Students from the school's LGBTQ community speak openly about their own coming out stories, and a fire is ignited within the student body. They want more. An LGBT group is created, a safe space is found within the school, and they start a new journey where they are at the forefront of the council's plan on equality and diversity. It feels good and it feels promising. 2020, he's been on a bit of a journey. He's been rejected for numerous leadership posts, and he's questioned if his work in gay rights in school has something to do with it. Is he too progressive, even years after Section 28 has ended? He will never know, but that is the legacy of Section 28, the feeling of not being good enough. He's now getting married and finds himself in another part of Scotland, in another council and in another school. Things aren't as progressive as they should be, but they are getting there. The council and the head teacher know change is needed and are embracing how to make it successful. It feels good, although social media, for all its good, has its own flaws too. He has found, along with others wanting inclusive education, that he has been branded a pervert, a paedophile, and even has had some death threats. For decades, our community has been subject to homophobic propaganda, which paints us as a threat to children by claiming that we are paedophiles, child abusers, groomers. And until recently, we believed that we had moved on from those dark days. But sadly, this is not the case online. He's happy with what he's achieved and knows that teachers across the country who are authentically their gay selves or who are allies are supporting school groups and making huge differences to our young people and their futures. The Time for Inclusive Education campaign has succeeded in their aims when the Scottish Government announced that it had accepted its recommendation of the working group in full and would be embedding LGBTQI themes across the national curriculum by March 2021, the first in the world. LGBTQI groups are now common in most schools across the whole country. And staff are being confident in approaching senior leadership teams about how they can do things better. And faith schools are now trying to embrace and be more inclusive in their education. Difficult conversations were had along the way. Debates and words connected to Section 28 days were still often heard, and frustration meant that at times we felt like giving up, but passion drove us forward. 2021. It's the end of the pandemic, and he's been appointed as a senior leader in a small rural school in the Highlands of Scotland. To say goodbye and continue on their progressive journey, they hold a Pride Day full of love, laughter, rainbow flags. A Pride Party picnic is held in the sports field, and he leaves for a summer with a smile, knowing that equality has taken a huge step and that students feel safe and secure in their learning environment. After summer, he steps foot into his new school, confident that he's finally been appointed as an openly gay teacher as a senior leader, only to find out that a complaint has been raised with his appointment and his support for transgender young people. He has to have a really awkward conversation with his new head teacher about his sexuality. Inside, he's screaming, he's crying. It feels like school all over again. The rejection, the fear, the anger. This is not the start of his career in the school that he wanted. He tries to move on, but is challenged by staff on why they need to have a more inclusive education supporting LGBT young people. The triggers are starting to manifest onto his physical and mental health. He's hounded on social media by scores of people supporting anti-trans ideology and referred to again as a groomer and paedophile. And as a victim of childhood sexual abuse, he's broken by these comments. 2002, International Women's Day, and also his birthday. He receives a handwritten anonymous card to the school. It reads, "Fuck off out of our school, you big poofter. Our kids don't need a shirt lifter around them." He's left in utter shock as the school day is taken up with police interviews. It's not a student, it's come from an adult, and he tries to figure out how to move forward. A hate crime has been recorded to the police. He feels like he's walking on eggshells when he tries to do his job but doesn't know who to trust or who to turn to. He begins being micromanaged by the head teacher, gaslighting him that it's not the community. 2 months later, another card arrives. It's the same handwriting. He hands the card to the head teacher and bursts out crying. This one reads, "Still here. Time to go, shirtlifter. Repulsive man." Police now log it as a hate crime and stalking. And also, they talk to him about the tone of it being a threat. The trauma and triggers are just too much. He's taken back to the bullying of high school, section 28, the feeling of not being good enough, not being accepted. He leaves the school that day knowing he won't be returning. He's signed off work and is told that he's got post-traumatic stress. His council are supportive, and he finds a line manager who listens and acknowledges his experience, but he feels his career is over. 2023, his confidence in his ability and his profession are completely gone. The experience has had a negative impact on his marriage and his personal life, but everything is being talked through and things are looking better. He's been surrounded by love and supported to continue the important work of creating safe spaces for all, no matter their gender, sexuality, religion, race, or ability. He sets foot on that yellow brick road once again. The journey is real, and the legacy of the Local Government Act Section 28 is buried deep in many who went through it. Being gay was something to be ashamed of, but today it isn't. But it still isn't easy. A recent report found that 59% of young people had witnessed an increase in prejudice-based posts, comments, attitudes online, whereas 48% of young people have faced transphobic comments online during lockdown. As a teacher, we have a duty of care over our young people to educate them. No one stepped in to help me back then, and I feel a bit angry about that to this very day. It's amazing when you speak to young people about moments we have gone through and they can't believe that things were so different not that long ago. Words such as agenda and promotion are still heard from those who do not fully understand the notion of inclusive education. We have moved away from LGBT education being about sex education, and it's now about looking at those who have contributed greatly to our country and curriculum areas. It's about normalising family structures and seeing ourselves as the LGBTQI community in the classrooms we teach and learn in. Some staff still feel reserved about approaching this topic through backlash. Some schools are still targeted for being inclusive and doing forward-thinking work. And some students feel they can no longer carry on being bullied for being who they are. It's important that we remember that when we repealed Section 28 it left a massive vacuum. But we are slowly filling this. And it's a reminder that every young person deserves to learn in a safe and secure learning environment. This is the true measure of the attainment gap. Health and well-being is the responsibility of every teacher. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. As moving, more so in fact, hearing it spoken out than being read. Thank you. I think that really perfectly sums up the seesaw that we were talking about earlier. Things get better, and then things like that. We are on this seesaw. Telling these stories helps us to gather strength to move forward and to make sure that this downswing of the seesaw is as short and cushioned as possible, so we can get back to building equality. Next up, I would really like to welcome Ash back to the stage. Ash, as well as being a fantastic book publisher, is a poet and has contributed some work to this book. So please give a round of applause for Ash.
Thank you. So I'd like to share two poems with you today. The first is one I wrote specifically for this book, and it's called Transmuted. We couldn't find ourselves. We searched in vain on library shelves, in textbooks, TV, movies, Not a trace in any place we looked of any kind of mind or face or soul that looked like ours. We weren't quite sure, to tell the truth, what we were looking for. We only knew that something didn't fit. We knew that we were weird, messed up, abnormal, but we didn't have a word for it. We feared we'd never learn to get it right. Whatever it was, never quite fit in. We couldn't win. We tried all options, fight, flight, freeze, or just pretend. It made no difference in the end. They tease us anyway. Pretend to smile, pretend to be okay, pretend to be a girl who fancied boys. Scroll hearts on all your notebooks, buy the bras, blot lipstick kisses on your photos of the stars of stage and screen and song. Just fake it till you make it. Wake up, make up, play the role, keep smiling, that's the goal. Chin up, stay strong, put on the heels, pretend that nothing's wrong. Ironic, really, how much we pretended, if the aim was to protect us from the evil of pretense. Pretended family relationships, they claim, never did make sense. Thank you. The second poem that I want to share with you is actually a song. It's lyrics to Here We Go Again by the Beautiful South. So Here It Is Again is the original. This one is called Here We Go Again. And just following on from John's amazing piece, I wanted to really, this is a sort of a call to arms almost for protesting against the way in which trans rights are being stripped back in so many places, and LGBTQ rights more broadly around the world. I mean, Scotland has done amazing things in fighting for trans equality, but it's sadly not the case everywhere. So this is, I'm not quite brave enough to sing it, but I will read these lyrics to you. And you can imagine it to the tune of the Beautiful South. Here it is again. Here we go again, just like before, with a favourite targets in the culture war. Here we go again. Don't say gay. Oh, there's more words now you're not allowed to say. So let's start with trans and non-binary. Then pronouns. Don't you agree? Protect trans kids, that's the devil's phrase. And affirming, get in the sea. You can get in the sea. Don't try to brainwash me. And if you call me cis, but surely speech is free. Now we know who we love, and yet you won't allow us to be just who we are. Oh yes, we're LGBT, but don't forget the T. Why can't we be just who we are? Here we go again with a new disguise, Section 28 through modernised. Here we go again, and I feel so ill that the Tories block the Scottish gender bill. Here, heads, he's autistic, and heads not trans. Tails, he must be mad. Heads, she'll detransition. Tails, well, I blame the dad. Yes, I blame the dad. No, I blame the mum. But I prayed for them all, so don't be glum. Now we know who we love, and yet you won't allow us to be just who we are. Oh yes, we're LGBT, but don't forget the T. Why can't we be just who we are? Just who we are. Just who we are. Just who we are. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ash. Can't wait for your album of trans-related parody songs to come out, by the way. I think that'll be amazing. Thank you so much. And I can't tell you how wonderful it is to get to work with a publisher who gets it, because they're actually creative themselves. And, you know, queer as that, which is always good. So next up, I would love to welcome Mandy.
My chapter is Ask a Teacher. I'm Mandy McMillan. I was in high school from 1980 to 1986. Section 20 hadn't been implemented at that point, but there was no education then about LGBTQIA plus issues in my school. Name calling, bullying, and negativity about gay people were rife, and teachers never addressed it. There were rumours about a couple of our teachers being gay, but no one admitted to anything. And especially not me, young lesbian, scared to tell our family and friends after years of listening to slurs and negative connotations of being gay. It was all about the music in the 80s, lots of gender-bending artists from Boy George, Annie Lennox, men wearing makeup, cool eyeliner, flouncy lace collars, flamboyant hairstyles,
But this didn't lead to a more open-minded attitude when it came to sexuality. Well, certainly not in my wee North Lanarkshire town. I became a teacher in 1991 at the age of 22. I got a job teaching in a state comprehensive school in Glasgow. I'd left my wee town, embraced my sexuality, and was not going back in the closet. Section 20 had been introduced. I'd fought against it during my time at university, helping organise a gay awareness week and marching against it. I vowed that I wasn't going to lie and not reveal my sexuality to my students if asked. I wasn't going to feel that shame. As a teacher, we weren't allowed to promote homosexuality. Now, what did that actually mean? What was involved in promoting? The dictionary definition is to support or actively encourage or further the progress of. How could just talking about it or discussing be seen as actively encouraging people to be gay? I wouldn't be actively encouraging them to be gay. I wasn't marketing, oh, be gay, and selling it to them. This way, I rationalised with myself, I could be myself and not risk losing my job. There was a very real and significant worry for LGBTQI plus teachers that we could lose our jobs because of our sexuality. When students asked me if I was gay, I had to be careful. I would never deny it, but I would answer, well, does it matter if I was? Does that make me any less of a good teacher? Does it matter who I go home to at the end of the day? As a student in 1990, I worked with an English teacher who was teaching Edwin Morgan's love poems. The students responded really well to the poetry and asked the teacher, are we going to tell him that the poet wrote them to another man and that he was gay? I felt that it was relevant that they knew. A discussion followed with the class as to whether it mattered who the person was that the poem was written to, and did that make a difference to them? Love is love was the answer. As a drama teacher, a lot of our curriculum and topics are chosen by the young people. They have to devise their own plays and they have freedom to do this. I cannot dictate the subjects they choose. I'm there to guide, but ultimately at the end of the day, they pick the subject that they're passionate about and devise the play. In the 90s, I frequently had students choose subjects such as euthanasia, abortion, homosexuality. It was very much issue-based drama. The students would work on these plays, and I remember one evening they were performing them to their parents and friends. The deputy head teacher came and took notes from the back row. The next morning, I was summoned to his office. He was concerned about the topics. I reiterated that the pupils had chosen them, that this was part of their higher drama qualification. I only had a very limited say in it. The school I taught in was a Catholic state school, and I always made sure the Catholics knew the Catholic line about these issues. I told them what the Catholic Church said, but if they decided to not agree with that, then what was I to do? I couldn't brainwash them. I also informed the deputy that I'm reading a play with students called Brothers of Thunder by Anne-Marie de Mambro, about a young gay man who's dying of AIDS living with a Catholic priest. He said he would like to read it. Julie gave him the book and said that, it's been taught in other schools, and questioned, were we at the stage of banning books now? Were these children to get less of an education than the others? Discussing and acknowledging that gay people exist is not promoting homosexuality. He read the play and he actually said it was a very good play, and it had some poignant points about forgiveness, reconciliation, and the role of the church in the modern world. Talking to students that I taught late in the 90s and the noughties as to whether having an out gay teacher made a difference to them, they said, I made them just feel normal. For most of them, I was the first person they came out to. They feel they were lucky as they know that that was not the experience that many of their now gay peers had at schools growing up. Section 28 was being repealed in 2000, and I would travel to school seeing billboards that Brian Souter, the campaigner to keep the clause, funded, with words like, they'll make your child role play being gay. I was a pregnant lesbian working in a Catholic school, a drama teacher. It was really difficult facing this level of homophobia in the media on a daily basis, and I know it had an impact on my students. The drama studio became that safe space at lunchtimes. One student I know had been chased by a large group of pupils who sought to beat him with belts. The public debate and level of homophobia in the press had increased tensions and done a lot of damage. When Section 28 was scrapped, nothing much changed. Teachers did not have the knowledge or the confidence to support young LGBTQIA plus people. Perhaps the only thing that changed at first was the relief that many LGBTQIA plus teachers felt that they would not lose their jobs if they were found out. I changed schools. I wanted to do more work for equalities and sexual health within the curriculum, but was restricted under the Catholic education system. It took about another decade, I would say, and the Equality Act in 2010 being introduced before schools that I was involved in actively supported all the young LGBTQIA plus people throughout the school. The Act gave us permission and the help to change things. LGBTU Scotland worked with schools on their charter awards to help this. The TIE campaign, remarkable campaign to get LGBTQIA plus education embedded across the curriculum, was then enshrined in all Scottish schools. This made a huge difference. I ask students today about having out gay role models and teachers in school, and it still makes a huge difference to them. They worry that their teachers could be homophobic, transphobic, biphobic, unless they're actively showing themselves as an ally within their classroom, for example, with visible signs. They wonder if you can be out at your work. They often don't have any adults who are LGBTQIA plus in their lives. They like it when they have a teacher who just gets it. They can be themselves more, relax in your class and discuss the latest LGBTQIA plus character in a TV show. I've now been teaching for 31 years. When I think back to the 90s, when I taught thousands of young people who didn't have the support that we can provide now, I feel that they were robbed of something. I know I did what little I could, but it wasn't enough. A generation of young people have been taught that they were an abomination, too shameful to mention, pretend families, and second-class citizens. Society owes a huge apology to those young people, and we have to make sure we never go back to those times.
Thank you so much. What an incredible note to end that piece on. And I think kind of summed up by the whole thing of the book, we cannot let things go backwards. And I think so many of us existing today as out queer people, I know myself as an out trans person, it is not a pleasant world to exist in sometimes, but we fight and we keep fighting. And in education particularly, I love what you said about students who say that they can just relax. I'm incredibly open about who I am at work, and while I teach university students, there is still a kind of common feeling amongst a lot of them that there's a lot of relief knowing that there are members of staff who get it. And these are people who are now adults, which is always interesting to realise, I think. I'm going to read now as well before we move on to some Q&A. I'm going to read my piece from the book. First, I'd really love to just read a poem or two that is not in the book, just to whet your appetite for the book, I suppose. How many of you have made a really bad choice with someone that you have fancied? No, I've only seen like 3 hands up, and I don't believe you. Someone just put like both their hands up in a jazz hand style. That is only one. So some years ago, I was really into someone, and I confessed my feelings to him. They had to be like, yeah, no, I don't really like trans people, sorry. And I wrote a little poem about the fact that I was really annoyed with myself for not being able to just stop liking him. I don't know the time. It's late, but that's fine. Lit only by the kitchen light, fan casting shadows in my sight. It's quiet. Yet I hear a roar as I see him sleeping on the floor. My ears pounding, and I'm sure that he's the one my heart is crying for. But it's like ice surrounds my veins, cutting through capillaries of fire. It's like a knife right through my brain. My heart rate just keeps getting higher. It's getting really hard to think. I want to swim, but all I can do is sink into this. Not pain, not bliss. Part of me feels wrong, and not because it's unrequited. Part of me is turned on, but I promise I'm really trying to fight it. I can't control this. I think I should. And it's like ice surrounds my heart, cutting through the fire of feeling, no ending. No start. My brain is numb, my body reeling. It's getting really hard to think. I want to swim, but all I can do is sink into this. Part pain, part bliss. Wait, hang on. Why should I complain? I'm lucky to have a heart to feel with. Why do I feel this disdain? Love is a thing that surely must be celebrated. Unrequited love may not be easy, but it makes the world go round. But this man has made my heart crumble into pieces on the ground. And it's like ice and fire and rain, returning to feeling alone again, feeling my happiness run and hide. It's hard when love is idiot blind. But that's part of life, I guess. I'll get myself out of this mess. After all, what's left to do but rise after you fall? Thank you. Hello. How's everyone doing? Sorry, I get really nervous when I don't get much audience participation. How are you all doing?
Yeah.
Brilliant. What a teacher. This is a poem about becoming, about being honest. How many of you have ever reached that point in life where you've come out, but before that happened, you had to kind of come out to yourself? Yeah. Is there anyone in the room that's cishet just sat there going like, no? Is anyone in the room cisgender and heterosexual? No. Yeah, I've got a couple of nods. I am here to actively promote homosexuality, by the way. Honestly, it's so much more interesting. Just give it a go. Get a little bit clear. Okay, I want to hear more. I was silent for so long, not a poem or verse or a sound or song or anything really, except what I thought I was supposed to say, the things that I ought to think or do or say or know or hate or love. I was silent for so long. I still spoke, I still screamed, my words leaving my tongue red raw, my gums bloody, my teeth worn. Not an honest word, not an honest thought. I was gaslighting myself or the imposter with my face, telling me that I should stay silent and let him do the talking. I was silent for so long. A girl with a muzzle made out of peer pressure and social anxiety. A woman on a leash wrapped in chains of someone else's making. So deeply in denial that even Narnia's most observant fawns couldn't find the back of the closet I had locked myself within. I was silent, not of voice, but of soul. I was silent for so long. I blew out the candles, 18, 19, wishing for freedom. 20, 21, why isn't my wish being answered? 22, 23, 24, no more. The me that the world sees has taken over. Where's my voice? Why does the end not come? I tried to find a way out, too weak to die, but too weak to really live. I give up, I resign, I quit. I stopped being silent on a Tuesday afternoon. A day as plain and insignificant as my life had become. The words like milk, soothing the wounds in my mouth that had been open for so long. I am Kestrel. I am here. This is me. I was silent for so long, and I'm still learning, still finding my voice, still fighting the imposter that grew stronger under the silence of Section 28, still battling the internalized shame of a life lived in the shadows, a shame that, as a child, I should never have been forced to bear, still wishing on a birthday candle, still hoping for change, and I'm still learning, always learning. I was silent for so long, too long, but I am silent no more. Thank you. So now I read something that's actually in the book. I've called my chapter in the book Small Town Boy, mostly because this covers a period of my life where I thought I was a boy. And I'm a really big fan of Bronx TV. And I grew up in a small town, so it kind of makes sense. I have written this to cover a 10-year period of my life, from around the time I was 8 to around the time I was 18. Section 28 was in effect for me that whole time. I lived in England for my sins, and it wasn't repealed for us until 2003. So we got 3 more years of it than you did up here, although arguably we've all still got it and are still dealing with it. So I have respected my identity at the time. At the time, I was a cis gay guy. And so while now I am not one of those, I am kind of non-binary, trans, feminine, using she, they pronouns, still, again, for my sins, finding men attractive. Call me. So there are 4 short stories in my section that cover different periods of this 10 years. I'm going to read a short bit from the first one. It's called First Love, First Shame. I started secondary school in 1996, but I knew that I was queer far before that. The first time I used the word gay to describe myself was when I was 8 years old, some 3.5 years before I got to big school, where it starts to be used as an insult constantly, several times a second. My small town primary school was based in an old Victorian schoolhouse with a couple of wooden mobile classrooms tacked onto the side. I don't know if you know the kind of school, but basically the bottom half of the wall was kind of brown polished brick. The top half was some kind of awful green paint that had so much lead in it, it peeled off in big chunks. And there were radiators that bizarrely were painted brown. And the lights kind of hung much like this from the ceiling, but with massive glass lampshades on. So if you had any kind of fear at all, a breeze would come in and you'd be convinced they were going to fall off. The closest thing we had to modernity was a TV on a trolley with a VCR, one for the whole school, that would get rolled into the room. Documentary would be put on, it'd be rolled away again. Brilliant. Padlocks, yes. One of those little metal, yeah. I'm not sure where I first heard the word gay, but I both knew what it was and seemingly knew that I was it. My parents, liberal as they were, didn't really have any openly gay friends, so I can only imagine I'd heard it from a newspaper headline or something that my older brother had been watching on TV. This was early 1993, so it was years before questioning queer children to be able to gingerly type the words, "Am I gay?" into a search engine. Being romantically attracted to other boys was just a fact of life for me, a truth I'd always known. But at some point, that truth grew a label, and that label was the word gay. I had a number of teachers at that school, but the one I remember the most was Mrs. B. She was warm, encouraging, and she was one of the first people to tell me, an autistic young person, that it was okay to find things hard sometimes. Dual glasses with octagonal frames. Still love anyone that wears glasses with octagonal frames. Had a bob of gingery hair, and often when she thought nobody was watching, she'd sit at her desk and bite her nails, which ignited a lifelong habit in me, unfortunately. She was my teacher twice during primary school. The first time was in 92 to 93, the same year I'd come to refer to myself in my head as gay. My first kiss happened that year too. I had a small number of other boys that I considered friends at primary school. We were the weird, nerdy ones. Damn. And one lunchtime, we were playing hide and seek. 2 of us found ourselves hiding under the coats in the cloakroom. There I was, pressed up against my friend, hidden from view. And I remember turning to him and whispering, "Do you want to be gay?" Seconds later, the 2 of us were engaged in a snog that would only stop, and the sound of the cloakroom door brought us back to reality. At 8 years old, we knew what being gay meant, but more importantly, we knew that it was something to be hidden, to be kept secret. I would kiss my friend a lot in the coming few years until he moved away, But never once did we acknowledge each other in public after that day, nor exchange an actual conversation. He was my first love. He was also my first shame. If you'd like to hear the rest, it's all here in this book. Thank you. So with that, I'm going to invite Ash back up to the stage, who will lead us in a rousing Q&A section. I'll sit down. There you go. You go.
Yeah. So does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask either of us or either of the contributors?
Don't hold your thoughts.
Any areas
So I've got that is a fantastic question, and just because I know that people are listening online, I'll just repeat it again. So the question was, how did we go about finding the contributors, and are there any areas of representation that we feel are lacking? There we go. Okay. I thought there's more cable. I'll just logistics. So when Ash greenlit the project from the publisher, my immediate task was to find people to be in the book. And one of my big fears was that we wouldn't find a good kind of intersectional set of representation. I was very aware that Section 28 was something that didn't just affect the south of England. And I've lived in London for 2 years, but I spent the rest of my life not living in London, and was always so frustrated when everything was like, oh yeah, this is loads of people from London. So I was determined for that not to be the case. And so we kind of opened a call for contributors online, and I took kind of a lot of care to make sure that as many different places were sharing that link and as many different people as possible. And there was no barrier to entry. There was no requirement for people to have written before. There was no requirement for people to have any kind of literary experience. I wanted to make sure this was as open to first-time writers as it was to people that had already got books published. And I really wanted to make sure that we focused on the geographical representation of the UK. We had quite a lot of interest, and by complete chance ended up with 28 contributors to a book whose working title was Section 28 book. And so it kind of naturally ended up being called 28 as a result of that. But the goal was never a certain number of people. I'd have had 50, I'd have had 5 if they were the right kind of people contributing. We have got a really great intersectional range of people in the book, representing all of the parts of the UK. And actually the launch tour is focusing on a lot of the cities that we've got contributions from. There are some places obviously not represented, but I really have no desire to go back to the town that I grew up in, run an event. They have no desire to see me again either, so it's fine. And we have also hit a lot of other kind of intersectional milestones that I was really pleased with. I would, of course, have liked more people of colour to contribute to the book. However, we don't have none, which is great. We have a huge span of ages from people who were teaching or training to teach at the time of Section 28, through to people who were at school just after its repeal, talking about the legacy that was still had in place. So I'm very pleased with the kind of intersectionality of the book. But with any book, these are 28 people's stories, 28 perspectives on a law that impacted millions of people. Ultimately, not every experience is going to be reflected in this book. And I think we could probably publish a book a year. But we could publish a book a year easily of stories from people in that perspective. I hope that answers the question. Cool, thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
Hi there. Thanks very much for all your contributions to the topic here tonight. So a two-part question. One is fairly quick. Just from the point of view of internalized homophobia, internalized transphobia. Over the last couple of days in Glasgow, there's been a bit of a stushy like Glasgow town with a leading entertainer coming out and saying that they will no longer use pronouns or accept the use of pronouns to try and so that therefore will misgender people. How I mean it's the difficulty is when it's coming from within our own community, when the LGBT alliance is actually making headway, and you have people from within the community. Fortunately, there's been quite a backlash against what has been said, so I'm quite pleased with that. So it's really how do we as a community actually deal with the problem within our own community as opposed to necessarily out with. And the second part is going back years, I mean, I can, as you probably admit to, speak this section 28 anyway. I was in Manchester marching away back in the day, and my partner at the time wrote a letter on that very street that Margaret Thatcher gave. Never got a reply from them at number 10, but so I came out from a Brethren background and started as it was lesbian in the society down at Liverpool back in the early 80s, and then and currently one of the things I'm involved in the last 6 years has been Pride Jag, which is like this little LGBT supporters group. We've made some headway just with getting a few professional male players coming out, just one down at Blackpool and based on Scotland, young player, and I'm involved in the SFA a group steering group with regards to how we can promote. Which is it's a loaded term, it's actually a loaded term in terms of the way that Margaret Thatcher wanted it to sound. But how can in sport, and because my passion is football, some people might say partly different football, is how do we actually get to the point where we can see past the issues to actually encourage people to either support and be a supporter or be involved in sport. So that's the two angles.
I'll kick off, but I'm sure our contributors will have things to add as well. So for those online and those in the room as well, it's a two-part question. One is around how do we tackle internalized homophobia and transphobia within our communities? And the second question specifically relating to sport, particular football, how do we encourage people to promote, how do we promote homosexuality, essentially? Now, how do we encourage progression and progress in sport? Yeah. So in terms of the first question, I'm not a sport expert, so I'll focus on the first question first. From my perspective, we just have to hold each other to account because none of us are perfect and we're all battling our own internalized prejudice. And the unfortunate truth is that we live in a world where celebrities have quite a big voice. And sometimes they say really, really dumb shit. And any of them that are, I would say, decent human beings would, maybe listen if the community tries to hold them to account. I always want people to hold me to account, and I would hold anyone else in the community to account as well. And I think we just need to be as militant as we can about an accountability culture with all of us. Ultimately, we will of course disagree on things, but as a community, we have to stand united for progress and for accepting LGBTQIA+ people. The thing that I can never agree with anyone on is if they want to exclude a part of this community. And I think that is a line we should all draw. And I think we should all hold each other to account to make sure that happens. Yes, question 2. Let's talk about sports. John.
So I'm not a sport person at all, but my husband is. He's a figure skater, ex British champion, and he actually only went to his first Pride last year, and he is 50. He's 10 years older than me. But he, even in the flamboyant sport of figure skating, with the sequins and lycra and everything, he wasn't out because it was quite scary to come out then, I suppose. And he basically felt that his career would be over if he had came out. But what is really, really important, and what he's now kind of realised and recognised, having young gay athletes coming through, is that education is a huge part of that. So we've got Xander Murray, who is the openly gay footballer, who's going into schools, sadly around Glasgow, to come up to Highlands, but he's going into schools, and I was part of the Time Drinkers of Education campaign that went to government to push it forward, and large part of that, large part of my job as a secondary teacher is that we need to see role models within our school curriculum. So I had to make sure that in PE we were talking about Tom Daley, we were talking about Justin Fashanu, we were talking about all these openly gay people, and we've seen Robbie Claire Keegan Hurst, who basically were role models but had came out later in their careers, bar Tom Daley. And it's really important that for young gay LGBT students in school, that PE is a really daunting place. It's a really scary place. And actually it can't be. So it's really, really important that PE in particular has these visual role models on the school curriculum, that young people know that they can be openly their authentic self and be accepted. Football it's a very toxic sport, I find, not from the actual sport but from the kind of fan base, and we've had huge issues with race over the past couple of years, and that race is way far more forward than we are as an LGBT group. And I think we will get there, but it's going to take, as Kestrel said, people actually being held to account, to be challenged with their use of language, to have teams that they're doing now, wearing the rainbow laces, showing that they are supporting and promoting LGBT rights. And now that we've got this inclusive education coming through, and that twinned with the promotion of LGBT rights within the sporting teams, then I think we will start seeing a much more inclusive sport coming forward with a lot more openly LGBT people. I think we've got a long way to go with trans support, in particular in sport. I think that's a huge debate, and one that goes away into science. That is, I believe, wrong. But I'm not a sport person. But yeah, anyway, hope that answers your question.
I think ultimately, if football wants to prove that it's inclusive, every single football club should donate the transfer fee for every player to all of the trans surgery crowdfunders that exist online right now. I mean, we could have like 50,000 teach meetings happening if we just got them to donate everything, which would be great. But it is really important to make sure that we don't rely on performative allyship. We need to make sure that every step we take is not just for the visual, and it's not just for the vine. It's actually something that's tangible and supports people.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Hi, I was wondering if you're looking together this book, you come across any or much ignorance about different within our community. I grew up mostly under Section 28 at school, and I must say I don't think I heard about it until about 10 years after it had been revealed. I don't think I'd really fully understood the impact it had on me and everyone else until about 5 years ago. And I consider myself quite active, quite aware and quite, involved in these things, and I just didn't know that. And some of that was like I was coming out to my teachers being like, "Hi, I might be a girl," and they weren't like we kind of like the sexual age. They were just like not talk about it. It wasn't used to explicit like no stop sexual gay. It was just silence. I don't know if that was a shared experience or am I just like really ignorant and hadn't come across anything because I was getting it down?
Yeah, no, I can definitely speak to that. I was not aware of it until quite late in life as well. And I'd actually been living abroad, and I came back from another country where I'd been very much in denial, very deeply in the closet, completely, denying that I was anything other than cisgender and heterosexual. And came back and got a job in Brighton, of all places. Rainbow flags being waved at me from every direction. I couldn't go to work without walking past posters for the Lesbian Lives Conference. And, it was quite a traumatic time. But through over a period of few years, did sort of come to terms with who I was and come out. And remember going to an event where people were talking about queer children's literature and about education, LGBTQI education in schools. I remember being quite really surprised by this. I thought, I didn't think that you were allowed to talk about that. But it was only a vague thing, I didn't know that it was called Section 28. I just had this sense that it was something that you weren't supposed to talk about in schools. And they oh no, that's all been repealed. We got rid of that 7 years ago. Oh, really? Okay, great. But yeah, and even in the process of talking to people about the book, lots of people were like, oh, well, what's that then? And I don't know what that is. Tell me about that. And really shocked when we explained what it was and that it was so recent. And there's, some of the people, that some of our students even, it was repealed in the year that they were born. And there's like, wow, just before our lifetime. Like, well, excuse us, it was in our lifetime.
Yeah, it is something that from many of the contributors they said, we have a name for this. We know what it was now. But we didn't know what it was called, and it was really only after finding each other in community and really learning our history. And that's why books like this are so important. We don't have enough queer history books. If everyone who is passionate about queer history writes a book about it, then we'll be laughing. Because we need more queer history.
Got time for one more?
The question, there was more comment. Suppose there wasn't anything in the existing it was kind of given license. For example, I remember actually they teach me realize that wrong, but because there was no protection for it, based on saying that well, so it's kind of like forced to do but again, it was just that undercurrent. So the kids didn't know that, but adults were allowing these things because it's called the factor.
Having a policy that gives it license, and even not explicitly, by not actually saying this is wrong. And I think, but even when we say this is wrong, even when we have protected characteristics, we look at the kind of rise in transphobia over recent years. People feel somehow valid in their transphobia because it's a topic for debate. And we need to work out, because the law is obviously not protecting us enough. We've got the Equalities Act 2010. Where do we go from here? Okay, so if anyone else has any other questions, I've been waved up in the back, so I think we've run out of time for questions. We are around, so please come and chat to us. Just a couple of quick words of thanks, as is always important at the end of an event. So first and foremost, I think it's really important to give a huge thank you to everyone who contributed to the project. There have been some amazing people involved in this project. Our incredible contributors are listed on the back cover, they're listed on the inside of the front cover, I encourage you to check out all of their social media profiles, check them out online, follow them on social media, not in real life. Fill your bookshelves with their other works and you know, favorite their blogs and things, because they're incredible people. I want to say an absolute huge thank you to Joe and Mandy for coming along tonight to read as well. Please give them a huge thank you. This project could not have happened without the support of Ash and Reconnecting Rainbows Press. Ash, you were literally changing a several 100-year-old institution by being loud and proud as queer as hell as a publisher. So thank you for that. An absolutely huge thanks to the team at Lighthouse Bookshop for having us here tonight. What an incredible venue. I love the fact that this exists. Please come and make use of this bookshop. Buy every book that's on the shelf. If you have like rich relatives, just come and buy one of everything, please. Oh, pay it forward, mutual aid board. That's amazing. I love this shop even more now. Thanks to all of you for coming and giving up your time tonight. Thanks to everyone that has tuned in online. It's been an absolute pleasure to be here. And last but not least, I would just like to say a really big fuck you to Margaret Thatcher. A huge fuck you to the tabloid press. I would like to shake my fist and express my disgust to anyone that has ever voted for or supported the cesspool of human excrement that calls itself the Conservative Party. If there is one thing I hope we can all agree on, is that you should never, ever trust a Tory. So we'll stick around. Please make sure you grab a copy of the book if you haven't already, and if you can, or pay it forward for anyone that can't afford one. We're around. Please come and talk to us, and we're happy to squiggle on your book as well. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you.